Good morning and welcome to another Good Code Hackathon live stream. I am Stacy Hafner. I am a senior program manager here at DocuSign and kind of the Good Code Hackathon lady, I like to think. So I'm glad you're here today. We are going to have a great session and talking all about DocuSign eSign. And Joey, one of our gurus here at DocuSign, is going to walk you through everything you need to know to get started with our DocuSign eSignature. All right, so first of all, as we know, I'm going to go through some quick hits on what we're talking about today. So we have two ways to win. Our two ways to win are first is our Jane Goodall Institute Challenge, where you're going to integrate geospatial field data collection, and camera trap workflows for conserving chimpanzees and their habitats for the Jane Goodall Institute. Our second option is our Greater Good Challenge. This is where you're going to build an innovative web or mobile application that automates and connects agreement or e-signature processes for a nonprofit of your choice. Asterisk, that nonprofit needs to be a registered 501c3 organization or your local equivalent if you're outside of the US in order to be eligible to win. Also, common question we've had recently is, do I need to get permission from the nonprofit before I start building for them? No, you do not. Go ahead and start your building process. Do recommend if you are working on something really exciting, contact them anyways and let them know you're doing it. We've had some extremely great success for the nonprofits that we have that have been benefited from the Greater Good Challenge in the last couple of years. So definitely let them know you're working on it. All right, now let's get to it. Oh, sorry. Of course, we need to talk about prizes. What are we doing this for? So we have 50,000 in prizes to be awarded. Our top prize for our Jane Goodall Institute Challenge is $15,000. So it's more than our Greater Good Challenge prize because we want you to work on that one. So our bonus prize also, we have two bonus prizes. We have our bonus prize for best use of Esri APIs or ArcGIS survey, survey 123. That is in addition to other prizes that we are giving out. If you win one first through third prize, you can also win a bonus. If you don't win a first through third prize, you can also win a bonus. So you can win them either way. And then especially we want to call out for today, this is the big, this is really what you want to pay attention to beyond DocuSign eSignature. So Joey's going to get us started, and then you're going to figure out how you can reach beyond just our eSignature process. And that is a potential bonus of $5,000. So it's a big deal. Now, I'd like to introduce our DocuSign Guru, Senior Manager, Product Management. This is Joey Pang. Thank you for being here, Joey.
Yep. Hi, folks. I'm glad to get started.
Great. So, Joey, I'm going to hand it over to you. And everybody, please make sure that you ask your questions in the chat, and we will get those answered either during or at the end of the segment. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So let's dive right in. Oops, I noticed I might be sharing the wrong screen here. Wait 1 second. Stacy, can you actually check whether or not the screen is shown? All right, there we go.
We got it. Thanks, Joey.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's dive right in. Here's kind of the agenda. My hope today is to run through the basics of the eSignature API, as well as the kind of the eSignature product, and help you get your first envelope sent out. So let's get started. So the very first thing is let's talk a little bit about the terminology that we're going to use for the rest of the session. So this is the basics of the eSignature terminology. I'll actually start with this document. Let's look at the right-hand side first. So a document in DocuSign is essentially what you expect. It's a document. In this particular case, we have it outlined as number 3 here. it's essentially what your user are going to be signing. And a document can be many different pages. It is you could even have multiple documents, but document is kind of the core of where this all starts. Now, on a document, you're going to need multiple people to sign. Maybe you need one person to sign. Maybe it's just multiple people to sign. And so those in DocuSign are called recipients. That's the second terminology to know. Now, for each recipient, you'll need a place for them to sign or to fill out different information, like fields, tabs, maybe their name, address, this type of information. And those inside DocuSign are called tabs. So once you created, set up a document with recipients and tabs, you're essentially ready to send that out. And that unit we call an envelope. So think of envelope as the physical object. It's this thing that you send in the mailbox and send to someone to sign. That's essentially the kind of the digital version, right? So we have a digital envelope that can consist of many different documents, and where each document could have multiple recipients and tabs to go sign. Finally, if you want to package this all together and reuse it because you want to send the same set of stuff to many different people, then in that case, you would create a template out of it, which would be, think of it as an enclosure of all the content that you put together, but it can be reusable. So the real key thing to just remember is you have envelope. Envelope is your primary unit. You send, it's a package you send to someone to sign. Inside an envelope, you have multiple documents. Each document can have multiple recipients, where then you define the tabs, such as signature, field, for each of them to sign. Okay, so let's dive right in. So when you think about how to integrate with DocuSign, kind of think of it in 3 different phases. And so the first is kind of the upstream processes, right? eSignature is typically one step of what the scenario you're trying to accomplish. And so upstream, which is typically your application or the hackathon that you're gonna go build, is that the upstream process may be, for example, an HR system, where you are looking through candidates, describing the interview process, and from then on, you may have like NDAs that you need to send out, or even later on when you have offer letters send out. It originates from some sort of an HR system, right? Some sort of a system upstream. And then when that system decides that, hey, it's time to go collect the signature, that's then when you or your application goes to DocuSign and now creates an envelope so that it can be sent out. And so then we get into the middle phase, which is DocuSign. DocuSign essentially will manage the entire lifecycle of the eSignature process, whether it's authenticating users, collecting data, or going through the multiple different steps of eSignature, routing to different people to sign. DocuSign will handle all of that. And then finally, you get to kind of the downstream process, which is as your application finds out about what's happening in DocuSign, it can then decide through webhooks, decide what you want to do afterwards. So a simple case could be once an NDA is signed, then back in your system, in the downstream processes, you decide, okay, great, let's go set up an interview in the HR example. And so we'll walk you through the different ways to integrate with DocuSign, but just kind of get your thinking engine started. You can definitely go build an upstream process that, or upstream app that then initiates a DocuSign envelope. And then when the envelope is completed, you'll find out about it. And so your application can then go choose to do something else. So to first get started, you'll have to figure out how you want to send the envelope. These are the different ways to send. Obviously, the very first way is to just use the DocuSign first-party application. So you can send using our web application. We also have a variety of third-party applications, whether it be through Google, probably the most common that you will be able to use. You can also send through those applications. So that's if you wanted to build an app where the user still ends up coming to DocuSign or one of the apps to go and send a document, but then you may do something after the fact. But we'll focus really on the kind of the second two here, which is the back office integration. This is where you have an app that you call our APIs directly to send out an envelope for e-signature. And then the last one is about embedding DocuSign into your app. And so if you think about if your application, you may want the user to come in and drag tabs onto the document. You may want the user to come in and specify who needs to sign. Right? In those cases, for you to go build a UI in your application, especially for a hackathon, and then for you to kind of relay the end user's goals, but then call our APIs to do that through a back office integration, that might be a little complicated, right? Especially like when you're thinking about, oh, I need the user to be able to specify where the tabs are in a document. That's not particularly easy to go build in a user interface. And so if you want to, you can take these components that are already available in DocuSign and embed that into your application for the sender. And so let's get started with kind of how do you actually get this first send done. Before that, going into a little bit about the embedded sending. This is just kind of a really rough example of what it even means to do embedded sending. Just think about it in a case where you created an envelope. Maybe the user uploaded a document, or maybe you have a document already for your use case, but you want the user to go make some modifications to it, right? The user needs to go review it. The user needs to go and drag some signature fields on it, specify where the signature fields are. Again, very hard to build yourself. And so what you're able to do is then embed us through an iframe. I'll show you how to do that in a second into your application so that you have all the capabilities. And now you might be wondering, like, under what circumstances do I use the back office integration, which is like directly integrating with your APIs to send and manage envelopes versus embedding DocuSign to do that? And that's probably a good way to kind of, there's a couple of points to differentiate which method to take advantage of. If you're looking to have the user do any modifications to the document, or the user specify who to send to, and it's rather complex. So it's not just, I want to send to this one email address. It's, I want to send it to one email address sometimes, but then sometimes multiple people. And then for each person I add, I need to go add tabs. Those get pretty complicated for you to build your own UI. So those types of situations, it's better to embed us. Or when the document is flexible. So you don't really know what document you need. The user can upload multiple documents and then customize it. Using our UI is better. But if you have a use case where it's rather well understood, the document is standardized, like NDAs, and there's not a lot of heavy customization to the document, like adding a bunch of new tabs, then just the back office integration is kind of typically the easiest. Now, also, you might really want your hackathon to look and feel very good. And so we have a feature called branding, which I'll also show in a second. This orange theme that I have on the right-hand side is actually my own demo environment. That's not what DocuSign typically looks like. But you're able to go in and kind of customize that to the look and feel so that it matches whatever the application is that you're building. Okay. So with that, let's demo sending for you. This is really helping you to get a basic envelope sent out. Now, typically, when you're creating an integration, you'll need to go and do a lot of setup. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks, especially for the hackathon, to get you started, so that some of the heavier stuff, like setting up your integrator keys and setting up and getting OAuth to work, you'll be able to skip that for this. And so let's dive right in. So here I have logged into my demo environment. You can see the very nice theme that's going on here. So very first thing I'll show you is branding. So for branding, you can go to settings. And then on the left-hand side, you can see we have brands here. And then you can go create a new brand. But in this case, I've already created a brand here. So I can just show you what's available here. You can see you can specify logos. There's some simple colors that you can go set. For most of the colors that you see, we just have these 4 colors. And just applying this is more than sufficient for really getting the look and feel for most of the application. You can even see what kind of the sample looks like for email or in the signing experience or in other places. Setting this up is probably pretty quick if you just want to upload a couple logos, if that's relevant to you, and set some colors. You're essentially done, and that's all you really need. Now, once you've created this brand, just remember that there's this brand ID. For you, you can probably set this as default if you like. But if you want multiple brands or you don't want to change the default, just remember that there's a brand ID that we can go and use later right here. Okay, so then there's the next step. Okay, let's go send your first envelope. So for this session, I'm going to use a tool called Postman. It essentially allows us to mimic kind of API calls. There's many tools online that you'll be able to go use, including just within browser apps. So you don't even need to install an application. You can just use some of the web apps in order to do this. So feel free to utilize one of those and go along. So in order to make an API call, typically the first thing you'll need is go set up an integrator key. And we have documentation on that. But I'm going to teach you a little bit of tricks so we can kind of expedite that. And that's this tool here on the developers.docusign.com. It's called the token generator. If you just Google DocuSign developers token generator, this is probably the first page that comes up. And what this essentially is allows you to skip the initial process of creating an integrator key and even setting up OAuth. And so all it'll do is it'll ask you to log in. You'll grant this DocuSign app, which we already created, the access to whatever profile you are using to log in. And it will automatically generate an OAuth code grant token for you to go use in all the subsequent API calls. So in this case, I've already logged in and I've already granted access. And now you can see that it has my token kind of laid out there. You can copy and paste. So definitely encourage you to do that. Once you have that done, then we can come over here. You can see I have a couple of samples that I'll show you and walk you through the content. But what you'll first notice is that under authorization, I skipped everything related to do with getting OAuth to work and doing the token exchange. And I've simply copied and pasted the authorization token here. And so we're pretty much good to go. Okay, so now on the payload for creating your first envelope. So this is going to be the URL if you've created a demo account. And so with this, I have some parameters specified for myself. It's kind of my own account. So just make sure you fill in your relevant account ID. But this is basically the URL for creating an envelope. Now, creating an envelope is relatively straightforward. So let me first collapse this so you can kind of see the high level object here. You essentially have a couple of mandatory fields around the status, which is determining whether the envelope, you want to send the envelope immediately. In this case, let's just set it as sent so you can send this envelope and see what happens. And then you have an email because this is going to be delivered through email, and then a document and recipient. So fairly straightforward. And then you can see that I've included the brand ID here because that was the brand that we all created earlier and we want to reuse. So first, I'm going to open the documents. This is going to be the kind of the most interesting part. I have a document specified here. This is pretty much it for the mandatory fields. The only thing to know that this is probably the easiest way to go send a document, which is to take your document, whether PDF, Word, anything else, and just go convert it into base 64. Once you do that, you can have the bytes right within the payload here. So very easy to go just send this envelope. And if you're wondering how to do this conversion, most programming languages will have this inherently as part of libraries to use. You can also just go online and search and be able to find some base 64 conversion sites that will do this for you. And then the next step is to specify the signer, right? Who needs to sign? And then where is the tabs, right? Like what tabs do you need? So here you can see I'm setting this to Helen Singer. I have an email and a name specified, and then you can specify the recipient ID so that you can go and reference later. And then comes to the tabs. So for our full tabs available, definitely visit the developer.docusign.com site. But over here, I have a sign here tab, which is basically just the signature tab. And I'm using one of the, again, simplest ways to go and specify it, which is to have an XY position on a specific document on a specific page. Now, you might be wondering, okay, but then how do I figure out where this position should be, right? Like, do I trial and error? That's probably pretty hard. So for this, I encourage you to just use the UI. That might be the simplest. So just go over here into manage to create an envelope. And we can just send an envelope. And I have the document ready already here. None of this information really matters. What you're really trying to do is get to the crux of the envelope setup here. So this is just uploading document. You can see I filled in a placeholder name. It doesn't really matter. You go to the next step. This is what we call the tagger. The tagger is where you see the document, and you have all these different options for drag and dropping fields and placing them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the end here and just drop a signature tab. And now when I go open up location on the right-hand side, you can see it gives me the XY coordinates already. Right, so this makes it really easy for you to go place. You can use our UI for this. And then for me, you can see I've specified it. I think I placed it a little bit differently from the initial, but you can see this is roughly the same position that I specified. And that's really it. Now you can go send out your first envelope, which I will do that. And then you can see the response gave me back an envelope ID, some other information. This envelope ID is going to be important for the subsequent examples. I actually have a script here that takes this envelope ID and just puts it in a variable called envelope ID. So you'll see me reusing it just like account ID here. But just remember, this is essentially your envelope ID. Now, I sent this envelope, so I'll just quickly show you Helen Singer's inbox. There we go. Envelope has showed up. So now I can click and I can go in as Helen Singer, and you can see that this is the typical DocuSign signing experience with the signature tab placed there. So that's the basics of what we would call just remote signing, or basically sending an envelope through this back office integration. Now, the next step is, well, why don't we get everyone set up for embedding DocuSign? And so I showed you the tagger there for a brief moment, which is, again, this user interface where you're able to go and drag and drop things, add different fields. We've done very simple thing, which is just adding a signature, but, you may need to go and add tabs for all of these different fields. That might get a little complicated if every document is different. Right? If it's standardized, this is much easier to do. But if you don't know the document that might be uploaded, that's going to be relatively hard. So in that case, embedding this part of the UI, and there's other parts that you can embed, but embedding this UI will be really interesting for your application. So then how do you do that? Well, let's go back to this, and we'll go to a second example here. So here I have the exact same call as we did earlier. So again, this is an envelope to Helen Singer with just that mortgage application document. And instead of sent, the status sent means it's already, we're going to send the envelope immediately once it's created. You're going to leave status and create it. And so that's essentially a draft. Think of it as a draft. And the reason you want to leave it at draft is because now you want the sender to go in and really decide the final touches. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to send this envelope in draft. Now, Helen's not going to get anything because this is, again, not sent yet. And then I'm going to show you the second call here. So this is what we call the sender view and sending up the tagger. So you can see the base URL is the same, but then for this specific envelope, which again is the envelope ID previously referenced, I'm going to create a view for it, and this view is going to be called the sender view. Now, what is just remember that there's one important field to highlight, which is the return URL. This should be back to your application somehow. But let's not focus too much on that for a second. Let's just show you the basics of sender view. When this is sent, it'll generate a URL. And these URLs are meant to be one-time use. So generate them every time your application needs to access it. And then let me just show you kind of a very simple example of what happens. I have this really basic HTML file, and all I'm going to do is I have an iframe, and I'm going to include the sender URL here. And then I have this opened up. And so I'm just going to go refresh this page, and you can kind of see what embedding DocuSign looks like. Okay. It doesn't look the best, clearly, because of this kind of screen size I gave it. But you can see I have this is just a very simple way to embed parts of DocuSign's application. If you would like the sender to now go and do things such as dragging on name, reviewing the documents, among other complex operations. So it really gives them the full capability, and then they can initiate send right from within this embedded application. Okay, let me also take a moment to see if there's any questions that people are asking. Okay, so there's one from audience. It says, if I send an envelope for a purchase order for approval, and this person signs, approves it, can I later add more documents to the envelope, like PDFs of order tracking and shipment information? Got it. Yeah. So typically, once if you think about an envelope, once it's signed and completed, you don't really touch it anymore, because at that point it's like a completed transaction. But your application could easily design a front end in a way where you have multiple different transactions, DocuSign transactions, right? DocuSign envelopes shown within the UI, right? And so that's one of the ways to kind of go build out this hackathon. Okay, so let's dive back in. So here's kind of the key takeaways for sending your first envelope. We went through the token generator. Critically important if you want to get started very quickly. I think if you use this and you skip a lot of the OAuth and integrator key setup, you can probably get your first envelope out in like 10, 15 minutes, no problem. And then you can kind of take it more advanced from there. But if you are either maybe towards the end phase of your hackathon, or you feel very comfortable with OAuth, then here's kind of the links for setting up your integrator key. It is fairly straightforward. I think integrator key setup plus generating secrets and all that in total is maybe like a couple minutes. Then there's the utilizing OAuth. And so if you're familiar with OAuth, again, this should not be too complicated. But if you're not, then the token generator is a good starting point for you. The next is your base URL. You might be wondering, what is the URL for hitting the API? So again, this is the URL. It's demo.docusign.net, and then the REST API plus the version and your account ID. If you're wondering where your account ID is, that's pretty simple. If you log in, I'm actually going to exit out of this tagger here. If you log in and you just open up the top right-hand corner, you will see your account ID there for you to use. And again, the easiest way to send a document is really just to convert to base64. So many different means to do that. Once you have that conversion ready, you're able to send this through the API call. Second, and another point is you can send directly through an API, which we showed you in the first example, or you can use embedded sending to embed DocuSign within your applications, and that was the second example. Now, embedded sending, if you're going to embed, there's actually a lot of options to customize the embedded sending user interface. What we showed you earlier was just to embed the full thing, but there's all sorts of customizations you can do to it, hiding specific features, hiding send so that the application, your application still does the sending. And there's just various information that we have available on our blogs and on Dev Center. So here's one of the blogs I encourage you to take a look. You can take your time to screen cap this if you want to just save it for your reference. But that blog article specifically has a bunch of the customizations, and it also has links to other content about embedding of DocuSign. So definitely a valuable resource. There's another question that someone asked about what is the best way to handle collaboration with filling out a form with 3 to 5 contributors. So in the case that I showed you, it was just the one signer. For 3 to 5 contributors, it's actually not that different. You can simply specify to have more than just one signer. And you can, in fact, decide whether they collaborate in parallel or they will do it one after the other. And so that's all possible depending on what scenario you'd like. I don't think it will change how you send the envelope. You can still send using a direct API call and just initiate the send process. And just, again, you can send to many, many different people. 3 to 5 is not a problem at all. We've seen sometimes people will go and send to like 30, 20, 30 people. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. So I showed you the sending experience. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about signing. Right. So send, you can get your first envelope sent out. Then you can expand from there. But signing is also extremely interesting. So what I just showed you earlier when the email was sent to Helen was that this is what we call remote signing. So all it means is that the signer receives the envelope from DocuSign in some sort of communication. Most likely, email, and then they sign from there. But we actually have many different other things for signing. And a lot of applications that we see people build are, their API, they'll just send using the API calls, so kind of a back office integration. And then, but the signing experience is maybe, something that they really deeply embed and have a lot of focus on. And a good example is like opening like an insurance policy, right? Like just imagine you have an insurance app that you have on your phone, and you need to renew your car insurance, let's say. And the application already knows what document it is for renewing the car insurance. They know the terms, right? So they can easily send that envelope just using an API call. Nothing fancy there. There's no sender in this case, right? So the customer or the signer comes in and they open the mobile app and they say, I want to go renew. And so you just send, right? There's nothing fancy there. But the signing experience is interesting because you don't really want these links to maybe come from DocuSign. You may want to embed this signing experience really nicely looking into that insurance application, right? So then it becomes a lot more interesting when you think about what is possible on the signing side. So I'm going to talk about a couple of other different ways to sign. One is in-person signing. So in-person signing is about having a person not get the email, but they're meant to come in person to go and sit with some sort of agent and sign together. So again, very interesting use case. If you look at our documentation, we will specifically have a recipient type called in person so that you can facilitate this flow. The other two, so going to the next one is signer self-service. You can imagine there's a lot of these types of forms or like agreements where it's not really the sender who decides it's time to send it to you, right? It's the signer who needs to decide. Student forms are a great example. They need to go self-initiate and go sign a form. Maybe it's a class dropping form, right? Like you're not going to go reach out to an admin and say, hey, can you send me a document to sign for dropping a class? Like that's not going to happen. What's most likely to happen is you have a link on your website for the students to come in and go click on themselves and then go fill out a form, right? And so we call these self-service. And so one of the other ways to sign is to really just set up an envelope, a reusable envelope, which again we call template, within DocuSign, and then you generate a link for signers to come and just sign themselves whenever they're ready. And we'll show you that. The feature is called Power Forms, and we'll do a demo of that later. And then the last one is around embedded signing, which we'll spend a good chunk of time on. This, again, is about you having your application and you want to deliver a great customer experience, and you embed our signing experiments in the context of your application. And so the customer here doesn't really know it's coming from DocuSign. They just know that as part of your application, you have a step where you need them to sign a document, and you can embed us deeply into your application. Okay, so let's keep going. I do see some other questions I'll answer kind of towards the end after I finish kind of this section. So again, first on embedded signing. So let's spend a good chunk of time here. Over here, you can see I have a sample application picture where it's TGK Capital Financial. There's its own navigation menu, its own website, but the DocuSign signing experience is embedded inside with the exact same theme, and users can then go and sign there. So if you're building, again, mobile app, web apps, this is kind of the way to go. In general, how does this work? Well, you're going to generate a URL for embedding. You could embed it through an iframe, but there's also another way, which is just to use that as a redirect. So your application redirects to this URL, and we will actually redirect back to your application. And in the ABI call, you'll see we will allow you to specify kind of where this redirects back to, along with sending you some parameters so that you know what happened with the envelope, whether they completed it, they discarded it, they chose not to sign it. And you'll all get that information. So it just kind of depends what type of experience you want. If you want it deeply embedded within your application and seem kind of seamless, you can do the iframe approach. If you think you need a full page experience for them to fully review the document and it's okay to have a couple of redirects in between, then you can go the redirect route. Another thing to remember is that these links are meant to be secure and single-time use. So only use them for every time that they access this signing experience. Generate a link, show it to them. Don't generate and save it. Right? That won't work, and it'll expire really quickly. Okay, so let's dive in onto the demo for embedded signing. And let's come back here to Postman. So going back to our basic envelope, again, no change here so far. Still the document, still have some basic fields with the brand information and the recipient, which is the signer, and just one signer. But there's one critical difference this time, which is that you need to go specify a client user ID. If you think about the Helen this time signing, because we're doing the embedded signing, they're not supposed to get an email from DocuSign, right? Like the idea is they're going to go to your application. Your application may have push notifications to their phone or some other alternative, but they're supposed to go to your application to sign. And in order to tell us that that is what you intend to do, and for us to not send communication ourselves, you specify the client user ID. So if again come to Helen's inbox here, there's one envelope. I'm just going to go ahead and you can actually see the envelopes and send status. So we are sending this, but it's not going to create an email. So I'm going to go ahead. And here's the new envelope ID, which you always need to remember. And then if you come to Helen's inbox, I can do a couple of refreshes, but nothing comes in, right? And that's kind of the intention. Okay, so then what happens next? Well, now you need to go create an embedded view. And this is how you create it in an embedded view. Essentially, you pass in who you want this embedded view to be for. You may have, again, multiple recipients, multiple signers on the envelope. And so this is kind of the way to go specify exactly who. And remember, in this case, because it's embedding, DocuSign is not really authenticating the user, right? Like we don't really know who the user is. Your application knows who the user is. And so there's some information that you need to pass specifically around the authentication method, and some auxiliary information if you would like to give us additional information about who logged in or through your application. You can go fill out this information and we will log it on our side. If you want to know the full options for the authentication method, we have our documentation specifically around envelope views and the recipient view that you can go take a look at. And it will have all the information specifically around the different authentication methods that we encourage you to use to authenticate the user. Again, for the purpose of hackathon, you may just choose to skip this for now and implement some authentication method on your side later. And in that case, you can just specify none for the authentication method and kind of move forward with that. Then the last step is to specify a return URL. Now, why is return URL very important here? That's because the return URL, after the user signs, we will then redirect the page to the return URL, plus the parameters to tell you what has happened with the envelope. Okay, so you'll get a parameter that tells you whether it's completed or something else. And so if you think about the redirect flows, your application will then redirect to DocuSign, this URL to sign, and then redirect back to your application with the information about what happened in the document, so that your application can then go display the right things and do the right things. So I'm going to go ahead and create this recipient view, and it'll come back with a URL. I will show you, first of all, just what it looks like when it's embedded. So I'm going to go back to our original example here. I'm going to get rid of the source. You can see there's really nothing but just an iframe. Then I'm going to utilize this URL. Right? And if you're building an application, obviously generate this dynamically. These links only last a couple minutes for security reasons. So I'm going to come here again. I'll refresh the page, and you can kind of see what DocuSign looks like embedded for signing. Right? You see the document, and then the signer can go and scroll through and review. Again, totally branded, and then they can sign here. Another way to do it, which I talked about earlier, is do the redirect. So let me join in a second link. Again, these are all supposed to be single-use links, so don't use it for more than once. Create another URL, and I'll show you what I mean by redirect here. So again, we're going to open the signing experience. Just assume that I didn't paste it into the URL here. An application kind of redirected to this URL. I'm going to then go sign, and let's finish. And then you can see what happens is it redirected developer.docusign.com, telling us that the signing was complete, right? And this information you can then go use to decide what you show in your application on this page. And the reason it redirected to developers.docusign.com is because, well, that's what I specified here. Right? So this kind of gives you an end-to-end completion for the embedded side. Okay. So before I get to the next topic, again, let me take a look at the questions here. I think one of the follow-ups to the previous question was, I think someone said, yet I can only assign a field to one signer. Okay, so I think maybe going a little bit more detail about what happens if you have multiple signers. So the way this works is under the signer's object, you can see right now I just have one person. You can specify multiple of these, right? So it doesn't just have to be Helen here. You can specify many different people to sign. And then, so just imagine this entire object copied and placed, right? So the other people, and then each person will have their own tabs, okay? And that's kind of typically the default. Now we have some capabilities that allows you to share tabs between people. So multiple people can go edit a tab and acknowledge a tab change. But for the most part, each person will have their own tabs. And that's typically how you go and set up an envelope where people are kind of collaborating with each other. Okay, so going to the last thing now. So this is called Power Forms. I think you've seen remote signing, right? Which is the envelope goes to the email, and then the signer just uses that email link to go and sign. We also showed you embedded signing, and so that's where signing is deeply embedded into your application. And the very last one is Power Forms for self-service, right? Again, a lot of these forms, especially their simple forms like waiver forms and these types of things, you don't need the sender to send it. That's a lot of overhead. Think about the kiosk solution, right? Like when you walk into a company, there's a kiosk, maybe there's an NDA form there. No one is sending anything, right? These are just forms that, as a signer walking in, you kind of self-initiate. And so in that case, Power Forms is the best solution for you. So let me quickly show you how Power Forms works. So coming back to the DocuSign application, and this actually is mostly a UI demonstration, and then I'll show you where the as you're building an application, where then your application will come in to go integrate with Power Forms. First of all is you need to create a template, and I have a template. Now, mortgage application, maybe not the best example here, but let's just take this as a quick example. So I have a mortgage application template here. And you can see all this template is that I've uploaded a document, and then I've specified there's a signer there. You don't even need to go fill in information like name and email address. Okay? So just that's really all there is to this. And then on the very next step, I of course have the signature field. So what is the point of setting up this template? It's that now you have essentially a form, right? Like you don't even know who's signing it, but your intention is that the signer, when they self-initiate and choose to fill out this form, they will go fill in their name and email and other information and then sign the form. So in order to do that, I'm going to come here and select Create Power Form. There's no need for me to update the descriptions here, so I'm going to go ahead. And you can see it gives you an URL, and it also gives you an embed, so that if you wanted to embed this within your application, you can. But really, it's just a URL that your application can go embed. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL. And then all you need to do is post it on your website, right? Like this place where I had the iframe, you can just have a link here. And every time they click the link, they will get this experience. You can see it essentially is a form. I'm going to come in and enter my name here. And then I can begin signing. And that's it, right? No sender was ever involved. There's no need for any manual send or an API to come in and send, right? And so when you go and look through here, I filled out my name and email just as a form, and then I can sign. So you can see how this is perfect for like these kiosk type solutions, NDAs or anything to do with like waiver forms, right? These type of quick self-initiated signature processes. These are kind of this is probably one of the easiest ways to accomplish it, and you can embed that link anywhere in your application. Okay, and so that really wraps up the session. Hopefully this can get you really quickly started on building out your application and the hackathon project. So again, I just want to instill some key takeaways for you. If you take away anything from this session, number one is use the token generator to skip through a lot of the tedious parts of the integration so you can get right into developing. And then it's to pick a sending experience, right? We showed a couple of different sending experiences. Decide whether you want to just send directly through an API or embed DocuSign deeply within your application. Then for preparation, you can have branding so that look and feel matches exactly what your application wants. But then also you need to do some document preparation in order to send the first envelope, and conversion to base64 is kind of the easiest way to do that. Lastly, pick a signing experience. This is, again, very crucial, and often many applications can just be built specifically around the signing experience. So you can pick around between remote signing, which is, again, the email signing, embedded signing, which is your application embeds DocuSign signing experience, so the signer comes to your application to sign. And then you can do self-service via Power Forms. We didn't talk about the last one, so you can ignore the last one. It's on the slide. And then again, if you have any questions or you need more information, we have developers at DocuSign.com, which you can go visit, and all the content that we talked about here will be covered in various guides and the documentation and blog articles on the site. I think one last plug is if you have any product or feedback for the product, we have a new site that we launched relatively recently. So you can go and enter both ideas that you may have come up across while you're building your hackathon project, or even just general feedback, and post it there and share with all of us. And we will, when we do, actively monitor it. Okay, and that's it. So I think with that, we can probably go into Q&A. I know I answered quite a few. If there's any other questions, you can feel free to type it in the chat here, and I can address.
Yeah, ask your questions now, and if not, we will let Joey get back to the rest of his day. But mainly, I want to say thank you very much for showing everyone how to go through our eSign, and it's so helpful. This is one of the favorite, and anytime we run this live stream, it is absolutely a fan favorite. It's the most well attended. So Joey, thank you again. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm getting some thank yous over here on the side as well. Thanks. Okay, well, I'll see. I'm just going to close up with a couple resources that we are going to talk about once again. So go over the resources from our developer and hackathon specific resources. Joey mentioned a few of these. We have our developers.docusign.com. The Developer Center is kind of your one-stop shop for everything. Also, I want to call out specifically tomorrow. Join us at 9 a.m. for an ArcGIS Survey 123 overview. Those that are working on our Jane Goodall Institute Challenge, you definitely want to join us for that. As well, we'll drop these links and our resources into our Slack channel. So join our DocuSign, our Good Code Hackathon Slack channel as well. So that's that. Thank you again, Joey. And we hope everybody has a wonderful day. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thanks.